So then he went to his client and he said, hey, this is the counter we got. They're cutting the commission to X. And the client was like, oh, no, you're getting paid and we're not letting them cut the commission.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. My name is Matt, that is Shawn, and welcome to our show, Shawn. In today's episode, it's been a couple weeks and maybe even more than a month. It's been like a month and a half since the commission changes.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about what we're actually seeing in the trenches in real life. Is this, a monumental shift in how we're doing business, or is this, scarier in lore than it is in reality? So, Shawn, I believe you wanted to start asking me questions, which is a nice, refresh from the way we usually do things.
Yeah, Matt, before this whole thing changed, you had a listing, and it was kind of one of these listings where we were going to try, or you were going to try something different, because basically before the change happened, we could show commissions on the MLS. It would show what the buyer agent was going to get, showing the commission right there. But Matt had a listing where he was not going to show any commission. And so I wanted to see the result of that before this all happened, because that was kind of our learning experience to see maybe what would happen. So if you could kind of give us a rundown of...
Yeah, and in the past, Shawn, I've asked you, hey, if I have a hot condo in Clarendon, I'm talking like 2018, 2019, and it would sell in the first weekend, what would happen if I just put 0% commission? Like, do you think that would sell? And we've gone back and forth on that debate. But for this specific one, it's property in Arlington, Virginia, very hot market. And I was talking to the seller, and he said, yeah, I'm going to list it with you, but we're not going to offer any sort of buyer agent compensation. And I listed out the pros and the cons. I said, hey, here's what you can expect, and here's everything that you're going to miss out on. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to offer any buyer agent compensation. So, this was prior to August 17th. In the Bright MLS, we put in, 0% buyer agent compensation offered. I did put in like seller open to, talking about terms of the offer, all the, buzzwords that you're allowed to use. I don't know how open he would have been if he did get an offer with compensation. But what ended up happening is the first weekend we had an unrepresented buyer come into the open house and want to pay all cash, and didn't care about the buyer agent commission because they didn't have a buyer agent commission. Now, they ended up getting the property, but what I will say is that there was another party that was interested, okay?
Yeah.
They actually saw the property twice. They saw it once on, call it a Saturday, and then again on the Monday. And I had a couple different conversations with them, and, we had the offer in our hands. It was all cash on Monday, and the agents called me and said, hey, do you think we have a shot? And I'm like, yeah, but we have all cash in our hands without a buyer agent commission that we're strongly considering. The agent goes, well, I don't understand why you wouldn't even want to consider another offer, if it's going to net your seller more money.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, we've already had 2 phone conversations, and your buyer has now requested to see the property twice. This is a lot of conversations and a lot of tours without actually procuring a contract, Shawn. So I'm thinking, all right, are you going to talk about getting the seller more, or are you actually going to do it? Okay. And so they never ended up submitting the offer. They could have, the property was on the market for 5 days. They had plenty of time to submit the offer. So if they wanted to get more net, to the seller and submit a competing offer, they had the chance. I wasn't, if you interview the other agent right now, he's going to say, oh, that agent was an idiot. He didn't even want to look at the other offer. Submit the offer.
Yeah.
Submit the offer. There's no brick wall, between my email and your email.
Right.
Like, this is all like, hey, I can get your seller more money. Hey, I can do this. I can do that. Let me see it. I would love to see that offer. Never got the offer. Went with all cash. The buyer's happy. The seller's happy. Everyone's moved on with their life.
Yeah, and this is a hard decision to make when you're a listing agent and you have a contract in hand, and there's other agents that are calling or talking about it, but it's like, are you going to write this offer? And you have this decision to make, because typically that first weekend is your best time to get the best offer. And you got to strike when the iron's hot. And sometimes putting a deadline can be detrimental, and sometimes it can be great. And it just depends on the property, depends on the time of the year. And, that's one of the hardest things to weigh when you're a listing agent and give the advice to your client. And sometimes you take it before that deadline, or you don't put a deadline and you take the best offer that you can. Sometimes waiting it then pisses off the other side and they end up pulling their offer. So you have to be careful. Now, did you do ministerial acts on that?
You keep talking about ministerial acts. Here's the deal. I said, I will write up the offer and I'll send you the unrepresented buyer's form, stating that I do not represent you, I represent the seller. Mm-hmm. What I can do is you can tell me the terms and I will write up the contract. And so that's what we did.
That's ministerial acts. So basically,
when you say ministerial acts, it's like this code word. Like, why don't just say it in English? That's like real estate jargon. Okay,
yeah, it's real estate jargon, and that's just the way. All right, so he wrote up the contract for the buyer and got the contract through. He did not represent the buyer. That's not a dual agency. We don't do dual agency. However, it is okay to do that in Virginia. You're allowed to. You just have to get a form signed. We don't practice it. We think it's messy. But he did what's called ministerial acts in real estate jargon.
I gave no advice to the buyer.
Correct.
I gave no opinion. And I said, what are your terms? And I will present it to the seller. That's what I did. And then I didn't, there's the opportunity to get paid more, if you're handling, two sides of the transaction. I say two sides. If you're writing up the offer, you're doing more work, right? You got to deal with two different parties. There is the opportunity where some agents are getting compensated more for doing both sides. That, if you want to do that, great. This was not one of those times. So it was simply the seller, my client, decided on, we agreed to a commission that I was going to get paid. And then the unrepresented buyer came, and then there was no additional fee for that.
See, and so that shows you that sometimes this can work, and it just depends on the situation. It depends on who comes through and how that buyer is represented. And in this case, it worked. So your seller paid out less. It was a cash offer. Did it all go smoothly and everything ended?
Yeah,
well?
Everything went smoothly. It's so interesting when you get not as many showings as you think you would have gotten. And, you kind of only get one interested party, and the party fits into the box so perfectly. You start to think, was this the only person that was going to buy this property? Because this individual buyer paid all cash. Previously, 9 months ago, they had also bought another property in the community, all cash, that they just wanted to upgrade, right? This one was a little bit larger. And so I'm thinking, this was the perfect person to buy this property. And if they didn't buy it, sure, maybe this other agent had, someone that did. But it just makes total sense that this was going to be the person to buy this condo.
Yeah, and sometimes it works that way. Now, in hindsight, do you think you would have been better off and you would have gotten more showings had you put an agent commission in that field, or do you feel that it didn't really matter?
More showings, no. That's the thing. I don't know, right? We're never going to know that answer, because how many agents are looking on the MLS and saying, oh, this one's a good one, and then they scroll down when you were able to scroll down and see 0% and then not send it to their client. Now, obviously, they've removed the buyer agent field because allegedly agents were doing this. Now, when it all comes down to it, this property is available on thousands of different websites, from Zillow, Redfin, and every site in between. Now, I don't know if the all cash person wouldn't have gotten it if the next group, if we would have gotten that same net. I don't know how that would have worked out, but ultimately it was, a lower priced property in terms of the average in Arlington, Virginia. And if it was, say, a higher priced property and we were paying out 0%, and the buyer had to bring a certain amount of money to the table, out of pocket cash, to pay for their agent, then maybe we could have run into those issues of fewer showings or a lower net to the seller.
Yeah. I mean, you never know how it's going to affect you. But now let's move forward. All right. So now we no longer have a field that says what a buyer broker is going to be paid. And so you just had a listing that just came on, not, just recently. And we We want to see how the reaction has been and kind of what has happened, what is different now compared to that time. So this listing you just put on, there's no buyer agent field, no commission whatsoever in the MLS. How did it progress?
So I'll first start by setting the expectations, right? Because when people have a sour taste in their mouth after a transaction, usually it's because bad expectations or no expectations were set, right? When something goes wrong, it's usually a miscommunication on what was expected. And so what I'm telling my seller clients is saying, hey, this is my fee. It's X percent. We are going to go on the market. We're not going to offer out a blanket commission. Okay, that's not what we're going to do. Okay, because we don't know, who's around the bend, right? We don't know who's coming. We don't know what agreements they've signed. What we're going to do is be open to the possibility. So what I'll do is I'll give my clients a net seller sheet that outlines their expenses at closing. And what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to that bottom number, that net proceed number, after subtracting all the numbers and saying, here are the possibilities. So this is a range of your net sales price when you take sales price minus commissions, taxes, prorations, all that fun stuff. And so my most recent listing, what ended up happening is we got one offer, and then classic, we got like an all cash offer, 1 minute before the deadline, which was an unrepresented, but I sent out, did the old ministerial acts, as Shawn likes to say. But there was something about working with a professional agent from the first offer who submitted the offer on the first day. Their clients were the first ones through. They had constant communication with me that instilled some sort of confidence versus an all-cash buyer submitting it 1 minute before the deadline who is just, coming out of the woodworks for some reason. And the way we're seeing commissions work in the Northern Virginia area is I set the expectation that, hey, most of these buyers are going to anticipate the buyer agent commission coming out of that seller equity spot, right? Like a lot of sellers have equity in their house, in their transaction. So it would make sense that that's where the money's coming from. So that's something to keep in mind when we're looking at these offers. They put in, a certain percentage. When we did the net sales price calculation, my sellers were pleased with the outcome. We did not counter them on price. We did not counter them on commission, and we were happy, and we're closing in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think this is the main key. It's seller expectation. The main thing to think about is that the commission has now gone from the listing side to the listing, now the listing agreement only shows one commission, and that is the commission that you're going to pay for my services. The buyer side is just on the contract, but you have to understand that there's 3 contracts in real estate. There's the listing agreement, there's the buyer broker agreement, and then there's the sales contract. So most buyers have to have a buyer agreement signed that's going to state what that buyer agency is going to get. They're then going to transfer that to the contract. And so this is what you have to expect, or, let your clients know on a seller side what they should expect. And you did the right thing by doing a net sheet to say, hey, here's my fee in here. Here's all the closing costs. Here's a possible buyer agent fee. And this is maybe what to expect if we get it this range, or this range. Now, there are some things in that listing agreement that you could say, will you let people know that you're open to negotiating with the buyer about commission? That's a checkbox.
Who checks yes no there? Why would you ever check no? Say, yes, we're open to it.
We're open to it.
Like how open? Like, okay, you could be very, very not open to it, but there's no benefit of checking no, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, it's so hard because
why would you shut the door that quickly on people?
Well, in the instance of your last seller that paid nothing, do you think they would have said no?
Well, what I would say is we're open to it, and then when they submitted a list price offer with the commission, I'd say, oh, we're no longer open to it, right? It's like, all right, we're open to it, depending on the offer,
depending on the net, right?
Maybe you write 3% or 2.5% or whatever percent above the asking price, and we're more open to it.
Yeah,
right.
Well, that's the thing.
Shawn, I brought up a graphic you can see on screen. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put that up on screen. This is the percent commissions of transactions posted by a title company, which is kind of ironic because we've gone from no one talk about commissions at all to...
Oh, this is good.
Is it good? Title companies publishing confidential terms of contracts?
I'm not saying it's good. It's good to see.
Is this okay?
Probably not, but it's good to see what they're seeing, right? But yeah, this is kind of showing you, and it's almost like collusion in a way that we shouldn't see this stuff. But
Yeah, I'm like on the fence on whether or not this is okay or not. But basically, 70% of the contracts that Vesta settlements are seeing are sitting at 2.5%. And then it goes into detail on a certain number of contracts at 2%, 3%, and then 0% as well. And this could be, 10 contracts we're looking at. It could be 100. It's certainly anecdotal evidence. But I think what I'm getting from this is it's not like 90% zero, right? It's by a wide margin. Sellers are still, out of the net equity that they have, they're still, open to compensating the buyer's agent.
yeah, and this just goes to show you that, when you're doing that net sheet, you should do it based on the information that you have. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, oh, this is the percent that we typically see. That's what you have to be as a listing agent. You have to be showing these to the seller so that they can finalize in their head what they're willing to do. And, the crazy thing is there's also on the listing agreement, there's also like a portion where you can say, hey, I agree to say that we're open to negotiation, and I'm okay if you market the property as a certain percentage to pay out, right? But what you have to now think of is our buyer agency agreement has changed in the fact that if anything is above the number or the percentage that you put in your buyer agency agreement, if the seller is paying more than that, you cannot keep it, right? So where does that money go? So in my opinion, why does it make sense to push a certain percentage out there? Hey, we're paying X percent. Well, what if it's more than what that buyer has already signed for? Then you're leaving money on the table. So will that, again, it goes to that, do you do bonuses and things like that? Like, do bonuses work? Well, in this instance, I think you're not, in a lot of ways, you're not doing your fiduciary duty to your seller, because you're putting money out there that doesn't necessarily have to be out there. Just promote the property, and then in the end, the contract will state is the deciding factor, right? The net of the contract is the deciding factor.
Every day I get emails saying, hey, we're paying out 3.5%. Hey, we're paying out 2.5%. Hey, we're paying out this. We're giving this.
Yeah.
By the way, I like those emails.
Yeah.
And they're impossible to unsubscribe to. However many you unsubscribe to, you get 2 more in return. But I kind of like them because I'm like, oh, look at this Friendship Heights house that I'm never going to see. But it's got some pretty pictures. Well, let me flip the script on you and talk about the buyers, Shawn. Okay, so the buyer-broker agreement is still pretty aggressively worded when it says buyer will pay blank line, to buyer broker. So as the compensation, what sort of conversations are you having with your buyer? Because if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at that, I'm like, well, wait a second. This is a lot of money that this contract is guaranteeing I'm paying you. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, it's that simple thing, just saying like, listen, before this all changed, there was a buyer broker fee on the MLS. Now that buyer broker fee is going to be in the contract, and it's just like a seller net. It's just like if a property is overpriced. If a property is overpriced and you're trying to get a deal on that property and they're not taking that deal, then we move on, right? It's that simple. So if it's the same thing, if it's a seller net and we're putting a commission, we're going to put that commission in the contract. You're not going to pay it. We're going to put it in the contract. If that seller is not willing to take that net sales price, then we move on to the next one. And if you really want that house, then we're going to have to change the numbers a little bit to make that seller net work.
Have you had any instances of the seller striking the commission number from the contract?
Yes, actually. One, I actually did it because it was above what I had said to my clients. Hey, I think this is what we should see. And so I felt like it was a solid contract, but it was one of those ones where we didn't set a deadline. It was like one of the first days on the market. And I said, listen, I think we should pull that down a little bit. And they agreed with me. And so that's where I did that.
What else? Did you counter them on price as well?
We did. Yeah.
Okay.
So they were a little bit low for the first weekend. So naturally we made these adjustments.
Had you considered what was the monetary difference in the amount of commission that was countered?
$2,000.
Okay. So, and you counted them on price. How much do you counter them on price?
It was a couple $1,000. It was
Okay.
a total of maybe $5,000 of
Okay,
difference.
let's call it $3,000 on price, $2,000 on commission. Had you considered only countering them on price, so the price goes up by $5,000, the commission stays the same, because that way, it might be less painful for the buyer, less arduous for the buyer to come out of pocket to potentially pay their agent rather than financing that into the deal.
Maybe. I didn't, because I felt like most of the time in years past, I typically paid out a certain percentage. And like 99% of the time, I never went above that percentage. So I was like, all right, well, why would I pay more than that now if I've always been there before, right? And it all worked out.
Did you get any other offers on this property? Oh, sounds like that buyer's agent's doing you a favor.
Well,
solving your problems.
You could say that, but at the same time, I felt what was kind of ordinary for our area is what I kind of countered them at. And I thought, if they have a problem with this, they can counter us back, but they didn't. They took it. So
they weren't going to lose the deal over $2,000 and throw their hands up.
No, and that's the thing is, did they actually have? Here's the thing is, some agents might just put any commission on that line just to see what happens, but on the buyer agreement, they have a certain percentage. So are they chiming up together, right? Are they lining up?
What are they telling their client? Hey, we're going to ask for this percentage, which is way higher. But then if it accepts, you don't have to pay. If it gets cut down, we'll sort something out.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're saying, but that could be happening. So I'm thinking, all right, I've sold many, many properties in this area at this percent. Well, I'm gonna counter them at that percent because that's what I've always paid out. And if it's higher than that, then that's your problem. But if it was maybe, I don't know. It was like a real world kind of situation that I felt I had the right to do, and I was representing my clients in the best way that I could. And I didn't think that another couple $1,000s to the buyer agent was necessary. I thought it was let's get this deal done in the best way we can. However, I did see this on another side where, on a real world buyer side for our team, one of our teammates went under contract as a buyer agent, and it was a lead that I had given him. And so typically there's a certain split that goes between team and the lead. And so he called me and he's like, "Hey, Shawn, these people are trying to negotiate the commission down," and it was down further than
these
what
people
we had. The sellers.
The sellers.
Yep. So he had written a contract on a property, and the sellers didn't even negotiate on the price. They went straight for the commission. And they cut it lower than kind of what we've
pretty
seen.
significantly.
Yeah. And so I was like, listen, I get it. You've worked hard on this. Why don't you just try to get that back up and just talk to your client about it? And he called me first. Okay.
Yeah.
He called me first before he talked to his client. And I said, talk to your client about it. But, I would counter and just say, hey, listen, this is what we have signed our agreement at, and this is what we want to try to get, and counter them at. If it doesn't work, then we'll adjust our commission on the back end so that you're still making a good amount of money. I'm not going to hold it against you. I'll take the cut if you don't get this up, right? But try to get it up. So then he went to his client and he said, hey, this is the counter we got. They're cutting the commission to X. And the client was like, oh, no, you're getting paid and we're not letting them cut the commission. And so the buyer client went back to them and he was like, no, this is how I want to write the contract. I want you to get your percentage that we've agreed to in the buyer broker agreement, and let's push it forward. And they ended up ratifying. And so you can see it in both ways. You can see it as, all right, what I normally see, but what is normal anymore? It's all changed.
So on the other side of that deal, so team member is the buyer's agent with the buyer client. On the other side, we have the seller and the listing agent. Now, either one of two things is happening, right? You either have the seller saying, "Oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. No way I'm paying out this commission," or you have the listing agent maybe doing an ego power play of like, "Yeah, we're gonna squeeze this person for all they're worth." Do you see it as one of those two scenarios? Like, what sort of coaching needs to happen on that side? What is the motivation behind not adjusting the sales price and tweaking the commission, which had to have been, less than $5,000, I'm guessing.
Well, I
or
guess,
maybe it was more than $5,000.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I guess it's real, every agent is different and every scenario is different, and every agent does maybe their business for a different percentage. And so maybe that agent was used to doing a certain percentage for their buyers, and that's how they sign it. And just like me, right? I'm used to seeing a certain percentage. So I'm like, well, I think this is a little too high. I think, typically.
Did the team member call the agent and say, hey, just curious about the motivation that we're
No,
we're
I
seeing?
don't think they got into that. I think he told me that it was the first thing that they went after. Instead of going after the price, they went straight for the commission, and it was like, hey, well, it's a net. So let's figure this out. And thankfully the buyer stuck up for them. So that's the thing is, listen, we are still going through this whole thing. It's only been 6 weeks, maybe 2 months at most. And we're still learning as we go with each transaction. Now, Matt, what I wanted to talk to you next is, how has it been as a listing agent? Because I have my own things with this, but are you getting calls prior to them showing it or prior to them to writing a contract asking them about commission?
So many.
Yeah.
So many calls, so many texts. Listen, we're open to it.
Right.
What are you open to? We're open to, a commission in the sales contract. I don't know what that is going to look like. Do you what's your offer going to look like?
Right.
Is it going to have a home inspection? Is it going to have a finance contingency? Are you open to closing within 30 days?
Yeah.
Are you open to accepting list price?
Are you open to a seller subsidy? I mean, am I going to give all that information out to you? No, that's why I say, keep that close to your chest. We're open to negotiation, but we're not going to give you the number that we're going to because we're negotiating.
Just write the offer.
Just write the offer.
Why are you giving the seller an out already?
Yeah.
You're asking them to shut the door. Yeah. Maybe there's agents out there that are blessed to have a million listings to choose from. And let's look at it from another point of view.
Okay.
Let's say you have a client and you do the buyer presentation with the client, and you both talk, and the client says, listen, I'm not open to any properties that are not willing or to pay the entire buyer broker compensation. I don't even want to see them. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so now we get into the realm of, okay, well, if there are properties out there that you really like that are not paying the buyer broker compensation, it would be a waste of our time to go see those properties. Okay. Mm-hmm. And maybe these properties are, 5, 10, 20-mile drive away. So they're not, walking distance. So this is a significant chunk of time, right? As a buyer's agent, how do you reconcile with a buyer who doesn't want to see any properties that will not pay 100% of the buyer broker compensation versus going out and giving the opportunity, giving the chance, writing the offer for some of these properties that may or may not pay out a commission?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really hard thing to do. And I think in this day and age with the MLS not showing commissions, we can't be 100%. And okay, yeah, I could call every agent and maybe I could say, hey, I have my buyer broker agreement signed at X%. Are you willing to pay that? And maybe they'll give me the answers. Maybe they have their listing agreement signed that way. But I think in real world problems, we have to look at how many have not paid out that in recent months or recent years and go on that. Because, I mean, let's face it, the majority of the listings that we have gone under contract since the deal and prior have all been pretty close, right? I mean, rarely did we see something that was paying out zero, but you had one. But we didn't see that often. Now, so I would tell my buyer, listen, there's no way for me to know 100%. I would say,
well, you call the agent.
We could call the agent, but I think I have enough skill in my negotiation power to be able to get this for you. That's what I would say. And if the seller's not willing to, it's just like a negotiation for anything. How can we know if I can get you this house if we don't try, right? How do we know if I'm going to show you all these properties? I want to know that at least I can try. I don't want to take you to a property that you're not going to try. Just try. Let's see if we can get it. Because, as long as a property sits longer, sellers' minds start changing. They're willing to negotiate a little more. It takes a little time. I just got one under contract. And yes, I got paid a buyer agency commission. We just settled it. But We wrote it. I felt like they were overpriced. We wrote it at a certain number and they wouldn't take it. And my buyers are like, let's let them sit. Let's let them sit on this. And we did. We let them sit. And then what happened was after a couple of weeks, I called them and I said, hey, you guys still open to this offer that we wrote? And they're like, yeah, but I might be getting another offer. And I was like, all right, well, when you get that offer, just know that our offer still stands. Okay. And feel free to do what you'd like with it. And so literally like the next day she's like, hey, we got the offer. And I was like, okay, cool. We're still standing where we are. If you feel like you want us to change in anything, just let us know. And they got the other offer, and I'm assuming the other offer wasn't quite as good as ours, right? And
you get a call back?
I got a call back, and they're like, all right, well, will you do this? And my client was like, all right, well, we got 15 grand off of what we were thinking before. Yeah, I think we'll do it. And so sometimes that time softens people up and you can get what you want. And I think that's just the same thing. So if I have a buyer that's saying, oh, I'll only do this, well, I'll get it for you. We're going to get it paid for you. If not, we're just going to move on.
So another way to reframe this question about my buyer client, or if you're a buyer out there, I only want to see houses where it's 100% guaranteed that they're going to pay the buyer agent commission. I don't have to pay anything out of pocket. Let me ask you this. Have you ever submitted an offer where it was so low, like you thought, why am I doing this? The buyer, who knows what your buyer client's thinking. The seller already told you that they're not going to consider it, the seller's agent. Yeah. Once you submit it, you think a fist is going to come out of the computer screen and punch you in the face.
So uncomfortable, right?
And then you get a counter back.
Yeah.
And then they accept the offer.
100%.
And then you think to yourself, there was no chance that they would ever consider this offer. And then you get an inbox. Then you get a new message in your inbox.
Yeah.
And then you get a message from Qualia saying that escrow's been opened up.
That's right.
So you never really know, especially, I said earlier, hey, there's so many on the market. You don't want to waste your time driving all these properties if they're not. That is the exact reason to do this, because there are so many on the market.
That's right.
All of these sellers are hoping and wishing. Type in real estate in Google Alerts and you'll get so many articles about how Austin real estate is just down in the dumps. Sellers can't give away their property. I mean, we don't, our hearts and prayers go out to the people in Florida with the hurricane coming up. The real estate market in Florida is treacherous right now for sellers. So the fact that you would willingly, conspire with your buyer to limit the amount, I mean, isn't that steering in a sense? Isn't that what this is all about?
Yeah.
Is you're intentionally not showing properties because there's like a 1% chance that they're not going to pay out a commission. To me, that's just completely the wrong way of doing business.
Exactly. Show the property, write the contract. And, yes, sometimes we're all on the side of people that want to lowball. We've all done it. You have different reactions from different listing agents. Some listing agents will chew you out and be like, are you crazy? This is insane, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whatever, dude.
Present the offer,
right? And then you get one, and if I get them, I'm like, hey, listen, I appreciate you writing the offer. The chances are really slim that we're going to do anything, but it gets a conversation started. And there are so many times where, as a buyer's agent, I'm like, oh shoot, I don't want to submit this. And then you submit it, and you're like, all right. But then the agent calls you back and be like, hey, thanks for the offer, man. It's not going to work. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, thank you for at least, submitting it to your client. And then, a couple weeks later, you get a call back and you're like, hey, you remember that offer you wrote? Would you guys consider this? And it happens, dude. I'm telling you, it happens. And so what I will always say is write the dang offer. Just put it in writing and submit it. And all we can do as agents is present it to our clients, and we'll just see what their reaction is. And sometimes we get bad reactions, and sometimes we get chewed out. We're like, why would you even send this to me? Well, it's my duty. I have to.
That's the job. That's what we sign up for.
We have to do some uncomfortable things, and we have to do some other really great things. But, you have to present these things. And I have been in situations multiple times where I'm like, man, I'm never going to get this deal. But you know what? I'm just going to put it forward. And I did it with my own purchase, my own beach house. I did it. I wrote that thing $250,000 lower than the asking price. And
you were about to get blackballed from that community if they didn't accept that.
Yeah, but that's the key is you never know what you're going to get. And thankfully, I wrote that offer and I did get it. And so my recommendation is to you, write the offer, put your commission in that line, and submit it. You'll see what happens.
Offers are free to write. All right, Shawn, I feel like this is a good place to stop for the week.
Yeah.
So let us know your thoughts in the comment section before, if we're on track with our strategies or if you have another thought. Let us know down below. Hit the thumbs up button if you haven't already. For Shawn and myself, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Take care.